Welcome to Grant Rock Warehouse, and tonight the Parish of Rock is back. We are doing episode 5 in our Slade series. Tonight we tackle Nobody's Fools from 1976 and Whatever Happened to Slade in 1977. We want to hear from you. Let's do it.
Talking bands no one talks about. Grant Rock Warehouse.
Welcome to Grant Rock Warehouse, and welcome to episode 5 in our Slade series. Parish of Rock is here once again. Parish, how are you? Nice to see you.
I'm really good, thank you. Looking forward to this as always, talking about one of my favorite bands.
And, you know, and the more we go into it, the more I like it. Because tonight we're looking at Nobody's Fool.
Yeah.
And we are looking at the album that came out in 1977, Whatever Happened to Slade. So we're kind of in that middle period. Nobody's Fool, 1976, peaked at number 14 in the UK. But man, when they released Whatever Happened to Slade, it didn't chart. But you know, punk, it was punk. Punk was out.
Before we get into it, though, I want to talk about this.
Okay.
So we covered this last time, didn't we? The Slade in Flame.
Yep.
And what I'm about to say is I'm absolutely certain is because of our show a month or so ago. So Slade in the UK has just gone manic all of a sudden. It's the 50th anniversary of the film Slade in Flame, and it's having a bit of a retro revival. It's been all over the telly, that people talking about it as a classic film. It's been reassessed. It's back at the cinema at certain cinemas in the UK. You've got Noddy, Dave Hill and Don Powell appearing on television together, probably for the first time in 30-odd years. You've got Noddy and Dave mucking about like they're little kids, having a lot of fun. They're appearing at some of the cinemas where the shows are being, where the films are being shown, giving a little bit of a commentary. It's been shown at the big South Bank Arts Centre in the South Bank of the Thames in London, an iconic sort of art venue. It's been shown there, and it's having a real retro, as I say, sort of reassessment. And I'm convinced, because it's happened within weeks of us doing that show, Grant.
So I'm sure we had a lot to do with it.
It's all down to us. I think it's all down to our show.
Well,
nothing
I'd like to
do
think
with
so.
the fact it's the 50th anniversary. Nothing to do with that at all.
Nothing.
But yeah, I just think it's brilliant. And all of a sudden, Slade is everywhere in the UK again, 50 years later.
Well, has anything, I'm just curious, because since you brought it up, has anything like entered the charts again? I mean, has there really been like a bit of a rebirth, so to speak?
Not from that point of view, but there's a huge clamour about them doing a one-off show as a sort of a farewell. Mm. And the fact that, I mean, Noddy and Dave Hill always say they get on well, and unless they get into the studio, into rehearsal, and then they start arguing. So keep them out of that environment, and they're best friends. So Noddy says probably not, but he did last Christmas. He did a small tour with a backing band doing sort of old rock and roll classics. Dave Hill has announced that he's doing the final Slade tour this Christmas. That's it. He's not doing any more. That's the end of his version of Slade. I'm just wondering whether there may be one show at the end of that where all four of them come together as a final goodbye.
Well, I think that would... Come on, you have to.
You would have thought, wouldn't you? And the other thing that's really interesting is Dave Hill is recording a solo album, and the producer on the solo album is Noddy Holder's son. So
I saw that. There was a clip that I saw.
I sent it to you.
You sent it to me, and he did mention it, which is kind of cool, isn't it?
It is. So you've got to think, if they're back celebrating Slade, talking about Slade in a way that they haven't for 30-odd years, you've got to think something's going to happen. I mean, the only thing I would say is Jim Lea, the bass player, is nowhere to be seen. I don't know why. But I don't know if it's health or anything, but he's not been involved, as far as I know, in any of this. So that's a bit of a shame. But
he hasn't appeared at a premiere or anything.
No, none of it. No.
Wow. Well, I wonder
Um,
what's going on?
but they talk about him as if, he's still sort of part of it. I mean, I suppose in some ways it's a bit like Queen with John Deacon, isn't it? They all talk about John Deacon still having a say in it all, but nobody ever sees him. So maybe
No.
although Jim Lea has been releasing music. I mean, he released a single last year, an album a couple of years ago. So it's not as if he's not, sort of releasing and out there doing things. So yeah, really exciting times if you're a Slade fan. 50 years later, and all down to the Rock Warehouse, I think.
Sure it is. Sure.
Anyway, I just thought I'd give that update before
I appreciate
the show. I thought the people watching would enjoy it.
This is fitting, though. Slade in Flames in the theaters. Yeah. It's a hit, and we're going to continue on. Parish and I are going to look tonight at Nobody's Fool from 1976 and Whatever Happened to Slade 1977. Both of these records, well, like I had mentioned before, Nobody's Fool charted to number 14 in the UK. Whatever Happened to Slade, released right in the thick of the punk rock movement, didn't chart. Both of these albums got a lot of mixed reviews at the time. But I think Whatever Happened to Slade, based on my research and looking at some of these reviews, I think actually probably fared better than Nobody's Fool, even though it failed to chart.
It certainly critically did well. And if you look at reviews that have been done in recent years, it's actually cited as a almost like a classic, and we'll come on to it. But it had a huge impact on the early 90s music. But we'll come on to that in a minute.
Yeah, the other thing that I noticed, a lot of people were mentioning that Nobody's Fools was a little bit more of Americanized sound. I don't hear that. Maybe it's a shift to more. It's a departure from what came before. I don't know how we're going to talk about it.
We'll talk about it. Yeah.
But yeah, it had a mixed reception. I listened to it and I don't really hear that so much. So there you go. I mean, Nobody's Fool. Like I said, there's a shift. I'm going to throw it over to you, Parish, talk about it a bit and get your take on it. And then your rating out of 10, since that's what we've been doing. And then we'll pop over and talk about Whatever Happened to Slade. Yeah. And everybody watching tonight, I want to know what you think of these records. Because we've been getting, the Parish and I were talking about this before, that these shows have been doing really well.
Yeah.
And so I want to keep the momentum going. We're going to go through the whole catalog because we feel that this needs documented. And I appreciate Parish doing this with me because it just makes the show so great. So Parish, why don't you talk about Nobody's Fools?
Well, I'm going to start with something. Your thoughts? So that's the front cover.
Mm-hmm.
That's the back cover.
Yeah, this is kind of like that.
And then you've got the booklet. But the thing I'm going to tell you, I learned something today. I noticed something today that I've had this album for 50 years. And I never noticed this until today. The song, the title track, and was also a single, is called Nobody's Fool. The album is called Nobody's Fools. I've never noticed the difference.
I didn't notice
until today.
Hell, I was calling it Nobody's Fool before. So
yeah. And it was only when I started writing a few notes down when I was playing it again earlier that I suddenly realised. So they say every day's a school day, don't they? And I've certainly learned something today.
Nobody's Fools doesn't roll off the tongue as well.
No.
Nobody's Fool.
Well, that's the phrase,
Nobody's Fool. Yeah, it's not comfortable.
But I guess they're talking about the band as opposed to individuals. I don't know.
I guess. I don't know.
I guess. So, so if we start with, just put a bit of background to the album. Slade had moved across to America. We're living in New York. They moved across in spring '75. They've been touring relentlessly across America, sometimes headlining, and they were filling out arenas by themselves. And in some cities, they toured, for instance, with Aerosmith and ZZ Top. But there were some cities where Slade were the lead and Aerosmith and ZZ Top were the support. So as a live act, we all say they failed in America, they didn't make it in America. But from a live point of view, they did really well. And it reminds me of bands like REO Speedwagon and maybe to a lesser extent Ted Nugent, who all said they had huge followings in the Midwest and could fill out big venues, but it never translated into record sales. And clearly that's the same for Slade. There was, you think about in 75 that they might have had ZZ Top or Aerosmith open for them.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Now, I don't know. I mean, I picked that up from something I read that Noddy Holder was going through. Now, what I don't know is whether it was 10 gigs and 9 out of 10 Slade with the opening act and Noddy's exaggerating how often it was spun. I don't know. But nonetheless, yeah, they were sometimes the headliner at some of these big venues.
But considering this time period and this record only went up to it hit 178 on the US charts.
Yeah.
That's nothing. Yeah, I mean, that's a blip, basically.
Absolutely. So doing well doing well live, but couldn't make it in the studio. And I don't think this is the case, having read Noddy's autobiography. But I think the album's almost a concept album and is a reflection. It comes across as if it's a reflection on how they felt in America at the time, and I'll go into why I think that a bit later. And yet Noddy says that they were on a high. They thought they were doing well in America. They were filling out the big venues. They were really enjoying it. It was they'd kind of come away from the UK after the sort of I suppose the failure of In Flame, decided to go to America, and he says they were on a high and were really enjoying things. I don't think the album necessarily reflects that in tone, and I'll explain why a bit later.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, as you say, number 14 in the UK.
Which I think's respectable, because I can't remember. In Flame did what?
I think that was number 2, something like that. So for a band that was supposedly out of favour in the UK, so I'm just trying to bring up my notes. So for a band that was apparently out of favour in the UK, number 14 is not bad, really, is it?
No.
And we'll come on to the singles in a minute as well. So shall we start going through some of the tracks?
Sure. Well, you mentioned the singles. You might as well talk about the singles.
Okay, well, let's start with the third single is the opening track on the album, Nobody's Fault, which didn't chart. The other 2 singles charted. Nobody's Fault didn't chart.
Yeah, there on this CD there is the US version, the edited version.
Yeah.
And it didn't have any impact here at all. It didn't do anything. But it was released here as a single. So.
And I think it's a great song. I mean, it starts with piano. It's a great opening track on the album, very melodic. It's got a groove to it. I think the backing vocals sound great. I think Noddy sounds on fire. I mean, talk about the album itself for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you think about the production, but I think the production's quite tinny and thin. But if you turn the volume up to 11, as I did in the car earlier today, it doesn't sound thin. It doesn't sound tinny. It sounds absolutely magnificent. So,
Parish, Slade is meant to be played at 11. Well, know that.
They even had an album, didn't they, called Play It Loud? And that's certainly what they did on this album. I think this album, produced by Chaz Chandler, so they haven't changed production at all. But I think it was produced to be played loud. And certainly if you turn it right up, it sounds fantastic. I think turned down, it does sound a bit thin, but yeah, crank it up. It sounds fantastic.
Me personally, that didn't register to me.
Yeah,
the tinniness. The next album, that we're going to talk about, really had quite an impact because I thought it was quite drastic in sound.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I think that this, even though the band is in a transitional phase, this isn't quite like what they were doing before.
No.
I still think it's close enough that when you hear it, you go, oh yeah, that's Slade.
Yeah, absolutely. And apparently this is Noddy Holder's favourite Slade album, and it's Don Powell's favourite Slade album as well. So certainly they rate it very highly. Although on the interviews they're doing at the moment, Noddy's saying In Flame is their best album, but then he would be if he's out promoting it again.
It's what, yeah. Hey, if Kiss the Elder all of a sudden got a reissue and
it'd be the best album,
platinum. Gene Simmons said that it's the best Kiss album.
Absolutely.
Do what you can do.
What do you think of Nobody's Fault?
I think this is. I don't. We mentioned that this is a transitional record. The production. I'm not bothered by the production. I actually let me scroll down to my notes. Some of the reviews that I had read said that they didn't think that this album was quite what came before in the fact that it seemed like this record was more of an album that was a collection of just tracks and not an album per se.
Yeah.
I didn't really hear that either.
No,
maybe I'm my own. I really like this record quite a bit.
What do you think of the song Nobody's Fault?
Oh, I think it's a standout track. I love it. I think it's very catchy. You can tell there is commercial potential right there, I think. Is it the best track on the album? Well, one of them, but I like it. It's very it's Slade. Yeah, it's Slade doing what Slade does best.
And then you get to the next track, Do the Dirty.
It's a foot stomper.
This is a funky. It reminds me of Wild Cherry. Funky, heavy guitar riff.
You get the boogie, the boat. What does Martin say?
Oh yeah, he shouts. Bogey? Well, he shouts boogie at the beginning of the song, doesn't he?
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah,
but it's energetic. I think Do the Dirty's kind of funky, kind of, but it's very energetic. You know,
I absolutely love it.
When I hear it, I feel like the band really is in a good spot. Maybe I think this whole thing. Do you know if this record was recorded in America? Or was this recorded
in New York? It's recorded in New York.
See, I think that's why it sounds like this. I think they like it. They like being in the States. They like using an American studio. You know, they feel like they've made it, and I think it translates to this record. Whether you look at it as a bunch of singles or just a bunch of tracks, when I hear it, I feel that the band is in a good spot, and I think it translates over to me. That's how I look at it.
And this is why I think it comes across as a bit of a concept album and is an insight into them, because you've got the opening track, Nobody's Fault, where they're kind of defending what they do and why they do it, and that you know they haven't become idiots overnight, and they're nobody's fault. And then you get track 3, Let's Call It Quits, where it almost feels as if that's going through their mind. Should we give up? Should we just stop? Let's just call it quits before we fall out.
I get like mixed signals.
Yeah, and then you get In for a Penny, where they kind of say, no, actually, we're in this for the long term. We're in for a penny. We're in for a pound. We're going to keep going, and we're not going to stop. And then you get LA Jinx a bit later, which almost sounds as if this is them summing up how they feel about America, where everything seems to be going wrong. They've had huge problems with kit catching fire on stage, the kit not turning up, concerts closed or shut down because of snow. And when you hear it kind of in that way, it feels to me as if it's maybe subconsciously it's kind of summing up how they felt at the time.
And also, in that concept, though, pack up your troubles.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's keep going. Let's pack our troubles up. Let's look forward. And I think this whole New York, I think this may be a concept album.
I mean, if you listen to Noddy, if you read his view of the album, he doesn't talk about any of that. He says they're in a really good place, which is why I think it might have been subconscious. Because you've got the last track when we get there, All's the World's a Stage. It's almost summing up their view to life. Just, we're big everywhere. Okay, we haven't quite made it in America record-wise, but we've made it live. We're big everywhere else, you know, all Germany, Australia, the UK. So the whole world's a stage as far as they're concerned. And I think there's that theme running through the album. And I love it for that. I think it kind of tells a story and it captures a moment in time on Slade's history in a way that I don't think they ever intended, but kind of sums it up, really.
Yeah, I like it. I don't have any issues with it. You know, well, think about it. You know, the Beatles, when they came over, you've seen the footage of them arriving at JFK Airport, and they're just like overwhelmed. You know, they loved being in America during that time period. You know, I'm sure Slade is the same way. You know, they had that whole, God, we might really be able to take over here, you know, make that transition from the UK, you know, conquer America.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you go through the songs again. I mean, Let's Call It Quits was a single. It got to number 11. It was the second single. I think it's really catchy. I think it's as I say, I think it sums up a bit how they might have felt. But yeah, I love it. I think it's a great song.
I don't think Let's Call It Quits was. I think the only thing that was released here as a single was Nobody's Fool.
Probably. Yeah.
In a Penny, was that a single too?
In for a Penny was another single.
For a Penny,
that got to number 11. So for a band that supposedly was out of favour in the UK, they had a top 14 album. They had number 14 album and 2 number 11 singles. The problem is, up till then, Slade had been on a run of number 1s and number 2s, so number 11 felt like failure. Most other bands at that time. Hang on a sec, I'm going to sneeze, I think.
It's all right.
No, I'm not. Most other bands would have given their right arm for a number 11 hit, I think. But for Slade, it was felt like a bit of a failure. So,
well,
but yeah, I think In for a Penny's a good song as well.
Well, I mean, after Slade and Flame, which essentially didn't do what they thought it was going to do, the band, I would assume, is that why they set their sights to the U.S.?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Because they thought, oh, the climate's changing over here in the UK.
No, I think
what?
Having sort of read the autobiography, Noddy and also Dave Hills, they just think, all right, well, sod the UK then. We'll show them. We're going to go to America and do what Elton John's done and David Bowie's got, and then they'll wish that they hadn't sort of criticised the film. I think that was the kind of tone of it. They thought they were going to come back conquering heroes effectively.
Yeah.
And maybe they could have done under different circumstances.
But I'm wondering though, if the band, I mean, we kind of touched on this, but I don't. If they were doing so well in the U.S. as far as concerts, I mean, what was it? Did the record company not promote them? Did they not have the backing? I'm assuming they were on Polydor here, weren't they? Were they?
You think of Kiss for a moment.
Yeah.
Kiss became huge live, didn't they? But the first 3 albums didn't sell particularly well. And it was only when they released Alive that it all clicked.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't uncommon for bands to have big live followings. And yet the records just didn't translate quite the same way. And I think Slade and Kiss have a similarity anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I think something else, I mentioned this before on the show, but Dee Snider says that he went to see Slade with all his mates, and he said Slade polarized everybody who went to see them. That half the people who went there absolutely loved them and thought they were the best thing ever, but half of them came away absolutely hating it and not getting it at all and not understanding it. And maybe there was a bit of that as well. But unfortunately, maybe those who came away and didn't get it were the ones who could have influenced what was going on with the record stations.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
And then we come to side 2. What do you think of Get On Up?
Shoot, I didn't make Parish. I didn't write anything down.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to get
I just picked out some tracks.
Okay, well, I'll talk about it. You can
go ahead.
Game. Yeah. So we get to side two, get on up, which I think is just such a heavy riff. It's absolutely brilliant. It's kind of Take Me Back Home Part 2, but on steroids. And we'll talk about it, no doubt, when we get there. But it's the opening track of Slade Alive 2. And on that Alive album, it is just absolutely mega, I think. So I think it's a great song. Absolutely fantastic song. But better on the live album, a bit like we were just saying, earlier.
That's their forte.
Thing. Yeah.
That's their thing.
And then you've got a couple of quirky songs. LA Jinx. And then Did Your Mama Ever Tell You, which is sort of about nursery rhymes, isn't it? I don't think I'll ever listen to those nursery rhymes again quite the same, I think.
I mean, I guess Noddy really liked that track.
Yeah, I suspect he did, yeah. He was certainly having a lot of
how
fun
would you
on it,
describe that?
Well, I think it's quite gospelly, isn't it, with the backing vocals.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's like twisted nursery rhymes, the lyrics, isn't it? It takes all of them and kind of twists them up. And the whole theme of it is, if you read between the lines on these nursery rhymes, it's not quite maybe as wholesome as we're led to believe when we're kids. So, but I think you're right. I think he does absolutely love it.
But the LA Jinx, do you think that is that something that happened in LA? I mean, do you think that was just part of if you look at it, could be part of the concept. But
I think it's part of the concept, but apparently.
But the narrative, do you think it was something they, who wrote that? Was it Jim Lea or did Noddy write it?
Noddy and Jim wrote it, and Noddy says what happened was they played 3 or 4 gigs in LA, and every one something happened, like the PA caught fire. The road crew, got drunk,
exploded.
Something that sound desk exploded, whatever, and so they had 3 or 4 full starts, and then they finally had a concert that went really well, and they went down a storm, and they wrote the song to say the LA Jinx is over. We've had all those bad attempts at LA, and it hasn't worked, and we finally had a good show there. So that's apparently what it's about.
Well, what do you think? There's a lot of variety on this.
Yeah.
And were you kind of go
LA
ahead.
Jinx sounds to me, the guitar work on it sounds to me like an American cop show theme tune.
Yeah. Good. Yes.
I think they've been sat there watching too much Starsky and Hutch or Kojak or something when they wrote the guitar lick on it. So.
Well, but Pack Up Your Troubles. What's your thoughts on Pack Up Your Troubles?
Oh yeah, Pack Up Your Troubles. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
I mean it's one of the lesser songs in my view on the album. It's country, isn't it?
It's Parish. It's full blown country.
You're going to have to do a lot of editing to take out some of these full starts, I think.
That's all right. I can edit. Don't worry.
And I know you don't like editing, but yeah.
Well, I don't, but
song,
it's fine.
Slade Go Country. It's got a bit of an early Slade feel, like Look What You've Done, because that had the fiddle on it as well, didn't it? So it's got a bit of that.
It's Dobro on it too. Paul Prestino. I hope I'm not butchering his name.
Yeah, I don't
know.
But
like I said, it's full blown country.
It's full-blown country. I mean, it sounds good. Slade do a decent
sounds
job
good,
of it,
but I can see the critique where it's just a collection of songs and not so much an album.
Well, maybe that's maybe.
But
maybe where it's come from.
But if you think about it, if it is a concept album, you could have all different types of things. Look at Who Tommy. It has a lot of different styles on it.
Exactly. And
look at The Pretty Things. That concept album. I mean, there's a lot of different things on there too. So, people are complaining about it, but as a concept, I think it works.
I think so as well. And then you've got Scratch My Back, which I think is really good. You've got Noddy, sort of like Reverend Noddy singing this Lordy, Lordy over the chorus when everybody else is singing Scratch My Back, I'll Scratch Yours. And you've got Noddy doing this sort of like he's the reverend, in the church, sort of getting his congregation to sing along. So I think that sounds really good. I think he must have had a lot of fun on that. And then you come into straight into I'm a Talker, which is a gospel song. So it's kind of segues.
Yeah, it's all over
well
the place.
From one into the other, I think that's quite fun. I like that. And then the final track, as I said earlier, kind of reaffirms if it is a concept album and they go through that full sort of thought process about America and their place in the world and what's happening in the UK and should they give up and all the rest of it, then the last song, All the World's a Stage, kind of, as I said earlier, reaffirms that actually, no, they're not quitting, they're not going to give up, they're going to keep going, and their view is, the world's their stage. So,
and it ends on a high note.
It ends on a high note, but also ends on that manic laughter at the end, which I find really strange. It's almost like they're laughing at themselves at the end, which again fits in with the idea of a concept album.
But, you listen to a lot of these tracks, they don't take themselves all that seriously.
No,
they do, but they don't.
Well, they can't do, can they? Because if they did, they wouldn't have that as an album cover, would they?
True.
With the red noses on the front and on the back. If they took themselves seriously.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a good album cover or not. I'm looking at it going, well, yeah, I get it, but I don't know.
I think it's. I like it. I really like it as an album cover. I'm not sure it would have done much to help sell the album, though.
No, I don't think it probably helped.
I think somebody thought it was a. And then, of course, you got inside the CD, you got photos like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they obviously had fun doing the photo shoot, I would suggest, but I'm not sure it helped with the album cover. And then you've got the bonus tracks, and I thought it might be worth just talking about a couple of them.
There's some B-sides.
So Thanks for the Memory is a bonus track, and that was a single. And on the last show, I said that they hadn't had a top 10 single since the In Flame album until the 90s. And somebody quite rightly in the comments pointed out that Thanks for the Memory got to number 7.
Okay.
So, which just shows that people pay attention, and the viewers of your rock warehouse,
yes.
they know their stuff. They know their stuff.
Well,
I think I know a lot about Slade. They know it better than I do.
There's always someone that knows more.
Well, I thought it was great. So yeah. Thanks for the Memory. Wham Bam, Thank You Man, in brackets. It's cool. I don't know. Do you have that phrase over there? Wham Bam, Thank You Man.
Yeah, but isn't just only from being mentioned in songs and stuff.
Yeah, well, it's
not really.
Here. It's not a particularly.
It's not a good thing, is it?
No, it's not really.
Right, I didn't think so.
I don't think it's something that people talk about anymore. But anyway, so so Thanks for the Memory, Wham Bam, Thank You Man. Got to number 7. I think it's really catchy, and I really like that song.
I like it.
And then the other one I wanted to mention was Raining in My Champagne, which I think is a really good song. And it reminds me of Twist and Shout.
So that was the B-side to Thanks for the Memory?
It was, yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Let me just check in case I get corrected again.
I think so. I think it is.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was.
It reminds you of Twist and Shout?
Yeah. In the chorus.
Mm-hmm. I can see
that kind of feel to it. So I think those two songs are really good. And could have been, I mean, they were recorded about the same time as the album, so it's a bit surprising they weren't on the album, really.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if it would fit the concept.
Yeah, that's probably what it was, yeah.
Raining in My Champagne. Well,
that might have done.
It might have worked.
Yeah, that might have done, yeah. So, and Thanks for the Memory might have done as well if they're thinking about giving up and
well, in the UK though, we don't put our singles on
they don't
always
put the singles on the albums. This is very true.
So that's kind of weird because Nobody's Fool was a single, but that's not the name of the album. But it was on the album, Nobody's Fool.
It's kind of the album title, but it's not really.
Yeah.
So we're gonna move on to the next one.
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious. What would you? Well, we can do it at the end. Yeah, let's move on to the next one. Next,
which I actually have 2 copies.
Gee, many Chris overachiever.
So I've got one which I got at the time, which is this one,
mm-hmm.
which has got and then about a year ago, I was in a second-hand shop, and I've never seen it anywhere else. And I saw it in a second-hand shop for a £5. So I bought it. I thought I'm going to buy it again just because it's there. So I've got two. So
is a £5 good for that? I mean, is that a fair price for that?
I suppose it is a little bit because it's damaged. The sleeve's damaged. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, I've probably paid 50 for it.
Oh, because you just know. So the thing is, it didn't sell. There's not that many of them floating around.
Well, I reckon I've got both of them.
You might have both.
I think I've got both the ones that got sold. Yeah.
Well, anyway, go ahead.
It shows they've got a sense of humour, though, doesn't it? I mean, whatever happens to Slade as a title,
with those pictures.
There's the pictures of them as skinheads on the front, and then pictures of them as they were then on the back.
Do you think the pictures with them looking as skinheads was because of the punk rock movement? That
it may have been. I mean, they'd come back to the UK at this point, and the music scene had changed. I mean, glam rock was dead in the UK totally. So not just Slade, but Sweet, T-Rex, anybody who'd been in the glam rock scene, apart from Bowie and Elton John, who'd moved out of it, there was nobody left. And it was all punk, or it was, disco, really. They were the two, I was going to say like everywhere, but I suppose less so in America from punk's point of view.
I was just thinking, you look at this record and when it was released. See, punk was riding high. But if you listen to this record, there are no glam elements in Slade anymore.
No.
There's a lot of crunchy guitars. It kind of makes me kind of on edge. But I would have thought, all the punks probably look at Slade at this point as a dinosaur act. But I think this album fits really well within that punk aesthetic.
Well, it does. And I mean, it was 78 was the first time I saw Slade, local to where I lived in a town hall. And I would say almost everybody in the concert was a punk. So it translated over to the punks. And the Sex Pistols, I think it was Steve Jones said that Slade was one of the few bands from the early 70s that they respected because they were clearly a working class background. Mm-hmm. They kind of were raucous. They didn't take themselves too seriously. They weren't up themselves. So there was a lot of respect from the punk bands, I think, at the time, and certainly the punks, I think, kept them going through this period, which I call the wilderness years for Slade. And I think the punks helped keep them going, really. And certainly at that time, that's what the concerts were full of. But you think about it, people my age, when Slade were a big glam act in 72, mm-hmm. I was 8. So in 77, I was nearly 15. And that, so you think the punks who would have been early teens, 11, 12, 13, now we're sort of 16, 17, 18, but they still liked some of the bands they liked. I mean, Mark Boland had a big punk following as well at that time. So some of those bands did translate over to the punk movement. But they definitely kept Slade going live. Not the records didn't sell, but certainly from the concert point of view.
Yeah, I can't imagine, since this record didn't chart in the UK, that couldn't have helped the morale within the band.
They will come on to it when we get to 79, so next show. But in 77, 78, they were still going. They thought they could win everybody back. They'd done it once, they'll do it again. They still had that kind of bit between the teeth. And they were slogging around the UK. But I mean, Watford Town Hall, bearing in mind they'd filled Earls Court Arena and Wembley, what is now Wembley Arena, which would have been 15,000 seaters. when I saw them at Watford Town Hall, it was packed, but it would have been about 800 people, 900 people. They were gigging around the universities and polytechnics, and they were playing the student accommodation or the student union. And I saw them at Brunel University. That would have been about 500. I saw them at the Marquee. That would have been about 1,500. So they'd shrunk right down the size of venues they were playing. But they were packed. They were absolutely heaving. People were queuing out around the door to buy tickets. So there was still a draw.
Sure.
And I used to think at the time, if people are cute, they would play Watford Town Hall and then Brunel the following night. They're 20 miles apart. Why not just go with a bigger venue and sort of have a couple of thousand there or 3,000, so they could still draw, but it was at these small venues and they were just slogging. I mean, they played a nightclub near us, again in Watford, Bailey's nightclub, and they did the whole week. They did a week's what do you call it?
Like a residency or something?
Residency there. And I went every night. I shouldn't have done because I wasn't 18, but I went every night.
Well, Parish, you're always breaking the rules.
Always breaking the rules. I looked 18.
Right. Rock and roll.
And it was absolutely heaving. Really, you couldn't move. You couldn't get to the bar.
Wow.
Every single night. Now, I'm sure there was people like me that were going every night, but not everybody was. And it was funny, actually, just as an aside. It was one of those nightclubs where it was kind of like chicken in a basket. Everybody would be sat there having their meal, watching the band. Slade come on, smoke bombs go off, confetti cannon goes off.
Wow.
And it goes into everybody's food or in the stuff. And they did that every single night.
Damn it, that's rock and roll.
They just did it every single night. Yeah,
rock and roll, baby.
It's rock and roll, yeah. So they were still drawing a crowd. It's just the venue
different.
size was small. Yeah, it was just different. So at this point, they still had the bit between the teeth, I think.
Well, I must say, though, that this is quite a record.
Yeah. So I said earlier that I was going to talk about the importance of this record. Without this record, there would have been no grunge.
I had seen in doing some notes and research on this record that, people have said that this is a grunge template. Or it could be considered that. I can totally see that. If the
Kurt Cobain says this album, more than any album, influenced the Nirvana sound.
I can see that because the guitars on here are quite different than any of the guitar sounds that I've ever heard. See, I'm on this just to let everybody know in case you're not caught up. I wasn't familiar with any of these records, so I'm listening to them as we go along. And my first thought is, holy crap, the guitars are like, it's almost, how can I describe it? I guess grunge would be a good description, but they are down, they are dirty.
Yeah.
It's an unusual tone. It's just aggressive sounding.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that Slade is aggressive, but the guitar.
No, this is definitely their heavy metal album.
This is very heavy.
Yeah.
And you listen to it and you're going, oh, wow. And I don't know if that's because they're of the era of the punk movement, but the thing is that I hear on this record, everybody always knows how Kiss always is very influenced by Slade.
Yeah.
This record kind of reminds me of Kiss Hotter Than Hell.
Yeah.
And you know how that sounds.
And it must have been about the same time, I guess.
No, Hotter Than Hell was 74. Wait a minute. First time.
75. Yeah. Yeah. So 74. A bit earlier.
Yeah. But for one, you can see how Kiss really sucked in a lot of this influence from Slade, obviously. Yeah. But I don't know if it's went back and forth.
Quote this album as being a huge, or Kurt Cobain did. The Smashing Pumpkins also quote this album as being a huge influence on them. But strangely, so do Twisted Sister and so do Motley Crue. So you could say this album created hair metal and created grunge. Who would have thought, eh? One album,
I think you might have something.
Could actually create both of those.
Do you think that this, I don't know if Martin's ever talked about it, but could this, we're talking 77.
Yeah.
Could this be the beginning of the movement, the new wave of British heavy metal?
Well,
do you think it might have had an influence on that?
They could. I've never heard it directly cited as an influence, but both Steve Harris and most of Def Leppard quote Slade as a major influence on them.
Okay.
I've always thought that was just being because they're a similar age to me. They would have grown up hearing the songs. A bit like Sweet. They quote Sweet as another big influence because that's what they were hearing on the radio. They were seeing on Top of the Pops. And it's guitars to the max, isn't it? So
guitars to the max here, and there's a lot of interplay.
Yeah.
No, the star of this record really is the guitars. I think
it is. Yeah. And the other thing is that's worth mentioning. This was released on an independent record label, so they'd been dropped
from
by
Polydor
at this point.
Okay.
It's Chaz Chandler's own record label that he started. I don't know if he had any other acts. I've never checked. I don't know of anybody else that was on it apart from Slade. But yeah, they definitely hit rock bottom that they didn't have a record deal, so they started. And of course, that's very punk because punk, lots of punk.
Well, did they get Parish? Did they get dropped, or did they just come to the end of their contract?
Well, I don't know. The way I've read it is they were dropped.
Oh,
but it may be that the contract kind of expired and didn't get renewed. I mean,
I do know that there is a reissue campaign that's been going on, and this record has not been
hasn't been done yet. No.
So is that in the pipeline?
It's not,
because I love what they've done with these reissues.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah,
and this this is, as I say, on Barn label. So you look at the record label.
Oh,
it looks, doesn't it? It looks very independent.
Barn. Yeah, it does.
Sort of put together by themselves, really. So
yeah, I don't know.
But
well,
again,
do you think that might have
still Chaz Chandler producing those? I mean, you'd have thought this was a different production, different production, but it's not.
It's quite a departure.
Yeah,
but I've got the Salvo CD, which I think is probably when they re-release it'll probably be the same thing. But
I think it came out in the early 2000s, didn't it, as a CD?
Yeah,
so it's
like
probably
2003, maybe. I could be wrong. Darn it! I wish I could have. I don't know. It's in some stack.
But if you go through the songs without going through all of them,
right.
I mean, it opens with B. I think B is a fantastic opener. I don't know what you think.
B. Well, that's one of their more popular tracks too.
Yeah,
that's on Slade Alive too.
It is.
Yeah,
and I mean, the chorus. Sorry, the verse on it. He talks it. It's almost early rap. I think the Noddy sings it so fast. He's almost talking it. It's almost a rap song in the verse.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen.
And then it goes into a chorus. So I'm not saying Slade invented rap. I mean, they invented grunge. They invented hair metal,
heavy metal, hair metal. They invented rap.
Maybe rap. Who's
That's what you're saying.
But kind of, yeah. I think might be going slightly overboard with the rap bit.
Maybe, but I might as well embrace it. Exactly. I think it's a great track. I like it. Yeah. This record, to me, though, sounds more like a cohesive record.
It does, and it is so. Fuzz boxes turned up to the max on it, isn't it? And
I'm not sure what it is.
It's well, I think it sounds to me like a fuzz box.
I guess, but
I was in a band at the time who had a guitarist who he played everything through a fuzz box, and it sounded like this. So that's why.
But it's like, box. I mean, the
distortion is right turned up, isn't it? And then you get, Gypsy Roadhog has got a really funny story to it. So Gypsy Roadhog was the first single. It's the third track on the album. It's the first single. Mm-hmm. And it got picked up by the BBC because Slade were back in the UK. Well, they showed it on a kids program, Blue Peter, and Slater on there, and they played it live. And then there was a load of parents phoned up saying, "This is a song about drugs. How dare you put a song about drugs on a children's program?" And the BBC just went the other way in extreme and just banned it. they didn't kind of temper it; they just banned it outright. So it got no airplay on the radio, and yet it started off. It was being played a lot, and I think if it hadn't been banned, I think it might have been a hit.
Well, why would they even go on that show and do that song?
Well, Slade say that it's not about drugs. They've missed the. They wouldn't say that. They wouldn't confess to it. So, but I think it's a good song. I mean, I think it's
kind of sounds like classic Slade.
Well, I think there's a bit of a southern rock feel to it. I think you can tell they played with ZZ Top because I think it's got a bit of a ZZ Top feel to it. And if you watch YouTube, watch the clip. They look great on Top of the Pop. They look great on Blue Peter, this program. And I think they thought this was going to be their comeback. They didn't realise they were going to get banned.
Well, the BBC liked to ban stuff.
They do, yeah. And that was it. That was the one single. They didn't release any more singles off the album. And yet they could have done. I think One-Eyed Jack with Moustaches that closes side one. I think
love that song.
It's absolutely brilliant. Really heavy, dirty riff. Heavy. Noddy's on form. This certainly could be a hair metal song, I think. Hair metal 10 years early. And I just think it's brilliant. And it should have been a single. I mean, whether it would have charted, probably not. But I think it's catchy enough to have been a single.
I think it's one of the best tracks on the record.
I think so. I think to me, it probably is the best track on the album. But yeah, it's great. And then side two. I mean, the thing I find interesting about side two is I don't think it's particularly commercial. I don't think there's many songs on there that are particularly hooky. But I just think they're great heavy rock songs.
I think this whole
heavy riff after another, really, across the whole of side two.
It's interesting that you say that because I do interpret it that it's not quite as commercial as some of the material in the past. But it doesn't take anything away from it, though.
No. And I read a quote a little while ago from Don Powell, who said when they went in to do this. So Jim Lea thinks the album was a mistake. That looking back, Jim Lea thinks it was a mistake.
Why is that?
That it was too heavy and it was the wrong music at the time. And yet Don Powell says when they went in the studio, he said for the first time in a long time, they felt liberated because they could do absolutely whatever they wanted. There was no record label pressure. They didn't have to write a hit single. They didn't have to sound like Slade. They could just do anything. And this is what they did. This is what they wanted to do at the time.
Since they didn't have to sound like Slade, is this really Slade?
Yeah, well, it could be, couldn't it?
But it's very raw. Maybe it was. Maybe you can look at it like that, be a little bit liberating because they don't have to bow to the record company.
Yeah.
They just have to talk to Chas Chandler. He produced it. He'd probably go, well, maybe do this, do that.
Yeah.
But
there's no song that sounds like a hit single, really. I mean, Gypsy Road Hog could have been. And I think One-Eyed Jacks maybe could have been. But generally, it's not got that kind of commercial edge that most of the Slade stuff has got.
But in a live setting, think One-Eyed Jacks. In a live setting, yes. Gypsy Road, be in the live set. Come on. But I like this rawness of this record. It's just I bet you
were shocked when you heard it the first time.
I went, my goodness, those guitars are buzzy.
Yeah.
But I don't think there was anything quite like it at the time. It's kind of groundbreaking.
You could, as you say, it could have fitted in with new wave of British heavy metal. It could have fitted in with hair metal. It could have fitted in with grunge. I mean, there's not many albums you can say that about.
No, I'd say it really fits in with that whole, Nirvana. Because think about Nirvana, that debut album. There's just a lot. There's some tracks I'm not bitching about the first Nirvana album, but you've got like catchy song, and then you've got a track that's just noise. But I could almost hear that Slade influence that Kurt Cobain is mentioning.
Yeah.
This, you could see there's a lineage from this to that. 100%. I see it totally.
And there is definite a sort of retrospective on it. I mean, it did nothing at the time, but there's been a lot of reviews of the album, in more recent years, and everyone says it's like an unsung classic.
It's a classic.
Classic rock, which is, I don't know if classic rock publishes in America, but is one of the few big rock magazines still over here, and they cite it as they say it ranks in their view as one of the 20 greatest classic rock albums. So there you go.
It's one of the 20 greatest classic rock albums that no one knows about.
That nobody knows about yet. In fact, it could be number one on that list because there's only 2 copies, and I've got both of them.
Yeah. So how do you look at these 2 records compared to what came before? Do you find these records refreshing? I mean, can you look at this and go, yeah, I do like, those earlier records, but these really have something magical. I mean, how do you look at these when as a Slade fan?
I have real affection for these albums. So look, I grew up, as I've said before, I grew up watching glam rock bands on Top of the Pops, and Slade and Sweet and T-Rex were my introduction into music, which is why a lot of the bands I like now, even modern bands, I still think have a similarity to that kind of style. And then when they kind of dropped off after In Flame, I kind of moved on to other things. So I moved on to Queen, ELO's, Thin Lizzy, Status Quo. And I have to say, I got Nobody's Fool at the time. Or I got given, my brother bought it for me for either Christmas or my birthday. So I had it, but I didn't really play it much because I wasn't that interested in Slade. I moved on to other things, which I guess was typical of the UK generally.
You were one of those people.
I was one of everybody. Yeah, I was one of those people. And then I started to go to local gigs. So I've said before, the first big gig I went to was AC/DC in '79. But I went to lots of small local gigs, either local bands or small, sort of unknown bands. And I saw Slade at Watford Town Hall in '78, I think it was, whenever this came out. And I was blown away by it. Is it 78?
77.
77. Yeah, so it must have been, maybe it's early 78. I'm sure it was 78 when I saw them. So so this probably was already out.
Yeah, maybe it was late 77 that it came out.
Yeah. Or maybe it just come out and I wasn't aware of it. And I couldn't believe how brilliant they were live. I mean, to me, I couldn't understand why they weren't up there with the Rolling Stones and the Who and other major bands, Led Zeppelin, these bands that could fill out stadia. I couldn't see why Slade wasn't up there with them. And so I have huge affection for this album, more so than Nobody's Fool, because it kind of rekindled my interest in Slade and my love for Slade and probably my love for heavy metal, because about this time, I started discovering Judas Priest and UFO and those sort of bands. So it was kind of my introduction into heavy, really. I mean, I like Thin Lizzy and Quo, but you wouldn't say they were heavy rock. Not to the same level.
I think, no, they're just... No, I wouldn't say that. No.
Yeah, but they were still quite commercial. But they got this album and Slade kind of got me into heavy rock. So I hold this real affection.
I think it's a classic. I think it's a well, time's been good to it. It's been an influential thing. You have an album like this, maybe it didn't sell a bazillion copies, but it was very influential with artists down the road. It's like Big Star. Yeah. Big Star wasn't noticed. All those records ended up in the cutout bins, but all it takes is one band to latch onto it, and It had a rebirth. I think maybe even this album could even.
Well, if Slade continue in the popularity, maybe they'll have a 50th anniversary celebration of this album, and the influence it had on grunge. Who knows? But so yeah, it holds a special place in my heart. Really, it's very important for me personally, and so coming back to it, I like Nobody's Fault.
Yeah, I like it too.
I think it's a good album. I enjoy it, but I love Whatever Happened to Slade. It's not my favourite, but I still absolutely love the album.
Whatever Happened to Slade's up there for me, I have to admit. I don't think that so far, in the way we've reviewed these records, even the debut, Ambrose Slade, they have not put out a bad record.
Yeah.
They have not put out a bad record. They've just gotten to a different period and time changes. But I think that Whatever Happened to Slade is I think it's one of their classic albums.
And they evolved. I mean, most people go, well, there are a handful of hits, Mama Will, Crazy Now, Come On Feel the Noise, and that was Slade. But actually, when you listen to the albums, there is a progression, a change in style. Nobody's Fault and Whatever Happened to Slade, I think, sound quite different.
100%.
So there's definitely progression and texture and depth, I think, in the repertoire, and we'll come across more of that. And then, of course, there was the singles that came out at the time. So again, it's not on the album, but "Burning in the Heat of Love" was a single, didn't chart, but I think that's a fantastic song. I don't know if you've heard that yet. Well, it would have probably been on your CD.
Yeah, that's on here. Well, I don't have it in front of me. I can't remember.
But I think that's a great song. And then they did a tribute to Elvis Presley with "My Baby Left Me, That's All Right." And that is, to me, just a classic Slade song, particularly live. I mean, they it would be in their set almost forever from that point onwards. And it's a bit like what's it called? Get Down, Get With It. They take somebody else's song, but they make it theirs.
They make it their own.
And there's some really fantastic live clips of them in the early 80s at festivals doing "My Baby Left Me." And Dave Hill in particular. Well, both Dave Hill and Jim Lea are just dynamite on the stage, the way they're sort of running up and down the stage and everything on it. So that's definitely worth watching on YouTube. Some really good clips of that. So they were two singles. They didn't chart. Although both got really good reviews at the time. Looking back on Wikipedia in the last couple of days, they definitely, that people were starting to pick up on Slade again in the press. It just took a few more years before everybody else picked up on them. But those two singles, I think, were great singles.
These bands, they climb, they have their peak, they could come back up. It's like the Aerosmith thing. If you looked at Aerosmith after... that whole Night in the Ruts era, and when Joe Perry quit to do Joe Perry Project, you would never have thought that they could have reinvented themselves, probably to be more popular than ever.
Yeah.
So,
And it's funny you should mention Aerosmith, because the last track on this album, The Soul, The Roll and The Motion, I think has got a killer Joe Perry riff on it. So again, you can see they toured with Aerosmith, and you could see that. I think it influences this
probably
song.
An influence. Yeah.
It's absolutely it could be an Aerosmith riff on that song.
Yeah.
So you've got a bit of ZZ Top in there, you've got a bit of Aerosmith, you've got a lot of grunge.
Well, Parish, we probably should wrap this up.
I think so.
We both like these records. They're a bit different, but you just cannot. If you haven't got these records yet, please do yourself a favor. You've got to at least get Whatever Happened to Slade.
Well, and they're on Spotify, so if you can't get
go listen to them.
Go and listen to them, and I think people would be surprised. I was going to say pleasantly surprised. I think they would be surprised by Slade on that album. So what scores then? What's the score? What would you give?
Oh boy, I'm gonna try not. I was thinking about that, how I would score them.
Well, I'll go first. Then.
I guess no. Go. I don't know. Give me your score first.
So Nobody's Falls, I would give a 7. So I like it a lot, but it's not up there. But Whatever Happens to Slade, I'd give a 9.
I would
It's still
probably
not,
give.
It's not my favourite though, as I said last time. It's not my favourite, but I'd give it. Whatever happens to Slade, I'd give a 9.
I think I would give Whatever Happened to Slave. Whatever Happened to Slade. That's a different band.
Yeah.
I think I'd give it a 7.5 because I quite like it quite a bit.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the critiques that people were saying I don't hear. I just think it's another great Slade album. Maybe not quite up to the standards of something else, but before. But that you can't always hit it out. You can't be the Beatles, ladies and gentlemen.
No.
And I think Whatever Happened to Slade, I think I would probably give probably an 8. You give it a 9. I could see a 9. I'd probably give it an 8.5.
Yeah. Well, I think that's fair because, as I say, I've got some emotional tie to it as well.
It's a definite better than Nobody's Fools.
Yeah.
But it is like one of their classic albums.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. All right, cool. What are we looking at next?
Well,
month?
We've got. I suggest we do Slade Alive 2.
Okay, I've got that.
That's worth talking about. I know we often don't do live albums.
Well, we did do a live.
Yeah,
we might as well cover this.
Volume 2's worth doing. I think. Then
show me that album cover again, because I've got that box set. That's kind of a cool album cover.
It's funny. So you can see there, Dave Hill has got no hair.
Yeah, what's going on with that?
I don't know. But this was recorded with him touring in the States in 76, 77. And I don't know why he's not got any hair, but there's a line in it. So at the time that they were touring, do you remember the program Kung Fu? And there was the character on there had the bald head. Yes. So on one of the songs, when it goes into the solo, Noddy goes, "Take it away, grasshopper." And if you remember the program, that's what he was referred to, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Grasshopper. And it just kills me. I've heard it so many times, and yet every time I hear it, I just laugh. I can't help but laugh every time he uses that line. Well, there you go.
But I do like that cover.
Take it away, grasshopper. Yeah.
I love the album cover. It's cool.
It's a really good album cover. Really good album, as we'll talk about next time. But
so we'll do Slade Alive 2.
And then there's Return to Bass.
Okay.
So we think Slade was at a low when we hit Whatever Happened to Slade, but they hadn't hit rock bottom yet.
Oh no. This
was when they hit rock bottom from a popularity point of view, not necessarily from a.
Well, the album cover has hit a rock bottom.
Yeah. So Return to Bass. So we cover that, and I think there's a Six of the Best EP that came out about this time, and then that takes us up to the end of their period before they had the comeback. So I think this takes us up to the end of the 70s, and then we can pick up then in the show after next with what the sort of early 80s, 1980 comeback and the album that comes from that.
Right.
But as
I'll be ready. I'll be ready.
Spoiler, this is a really good album, and it's got on there maybe my favourite Slade song. So there's a bit of a spoiler for the album, for the review.
And there you go, a little bit of a tease.
Yeah.
For the next show. All right, cool. Let's wrap this dog up. Parish, I want to thank you. Always fun to talk
really
Slade.
Enjoyed it.
I'll send you some more dates here shortly, and then we'll get back at it.
Yeah.
But ladies and gentlemen, you will see the Parish back in the warehouse. So.
Absolutely. And we'll see if we can get Slade popularity raised even more. Even more than we did after the last show.
Exactly. That's because we have an influence right now. So
we do. Yeah. Influencers.
All right, everybody. Please like, subscribe if you haven't. Be sure to check out the Contrarians as well. Anyway, thank you, Parish. We'll see you on the next one. Everybody I'm not sure when this will go up. It might go up pretty damn soon. We'll see you on the next one, everybody.
Yeah.